Imagine dedicating over 40 hours a week to your work. For women striving for career growth, the glass ceiling is a familiar hurdle. But for women of color, the journey often involves navigating the more formidable bamboo and concrete ceilings that impact AAPI and Black women. As therapists, how can we rise to the challenge of considering holistic support, acknowledging these unique career realities? Could executive and leadership coaching become an integral and empowering element of a comprehensive care strategy? Welcome to People of Color in Psychology, the show that explores mental health topics specific to culture, diversity, and communities of color. I am your host, Jack Sen. As part of our AAPI Heritage series, I am pleased to introduce Cynthia Pong, owner of Embrace Change, an award-winning executive coach, Forbes contributor, author, and sought-after speaker who empowers women of color leaders to advance their careers and claim positions of power. As founder and CEO of Embrace Change, Cynthia leads a team of elite BIPOC career coaches in providing specialized coaching and training programs for women of color, from high-performing individual contributors to C-suite executives. Her flagship leadership program, the Leader Accelerator, won an Anthem Award for accelerating the careers of women of color to become leaders. Cynthia's book, Don't Stay in Your Lane, The Career Change Guide for Women of Color, has resonated deeply with countless women of color across industries looking to make bold career shifts, cementing her role as the aforementioned voice on the career advancement of women of color seeking positions of influence. Cynthia also founded the Embrace Change Speakers Bureau, the first and only speakers bureau dedicated to amplifying the voices and perspectives of women of color speakers and experts. A LinkedIn top voice for job search and career, she is frequently called upon for her expertise on career advancement, negotiation, and thought leadership, with features in The Atlantic and on NBC, CBS, NPR, and more. Prior to her executive coaching career, Cynthia was a public defender and has taken those skills into coaching. She now empowers her clients with a unique coaching methodology calibrated to empower women of color leaders with precisely what they need to break down barriers, claim their worth, and lead with authenticity. As a Chinese American, Cynthia will have a frank conversation about executive coaching, systemic barriers that come up for people of color, and how those in the mental health field might consider executive coaching as a supplement for their clients or for themselves. Cynthia, thank you so much for, joining me and having this wonderful conversation.
Thank you so much, Jack. That was a very, very kind and super thorough intro. It feels great to be here with you, especially given your mission and the work that you are doing with people of color in psychology. So the honor and privilege is mine. Thank you.
Oh, thank you. Likewise. So it's we've had actually several episodes on coaching, and I'm always asking folks, what type of coaching. So we're going to get into some of the definitions. And the reason I think I want a little bit more conversation around coaching, because there has been more, I would say, cross-pollination or sort of integration of mental health and coaching. So before we get into that, why don't you share with us some definitions around coaching and the different types of coaching?
Absolutely. So if we think just broadest umbrella level, coaching in general, I think of this as the process of working with someone. Traditionally, it's a one-on-one kind of context, but it can absolutely be done in groups as well. And it's where the coach partners with a client or clients and supports that person to reach their goals, whatever that person sets their goals to be. So it's not really didactic. It's not about teaching. It's not like school. It's not about telling. It's more about finding ways to support that client or that set of clients to unblock themselves and move forward how they want to. So that could mean specifically techniques involving asking deep and powerful questions. Certainly with the foundation being deep listening, to the client. It could be leveraging visualization. It could be leveraging the power of metaphor and reframes, like looking at things from a different angle, lens, or perspective, all to, let's say, boost confidence or clarify goals or just maximize that person's potential towards whatever they want to achieve. So unlike therapy, coaching in general really focuses on forward-oriented strategies, how to support someone to take action, build forward momentum rather than addressing past trauma and getting into those things which would be fully be in the area of psychology and therapy. So within that umbrella, you've got different types of coaching. So there's life coaching, which is focusing on personal development goals, anything, maybe things around relationship, personal interests, stuff like that. That's not so much what we do at Embrace Change or what my background is in, which is more career coaching. So that's focused on the client or client's career goals, which could be job search, career change, interview prep, networking or negotiation strategy, career planning, and the mindset work involved in kind of getting somebody to their career goals. Then the final one I'll kind of share is executive coaching, which is really more about enhancing leadership skills and decision-making abilities for leaders, including executives, senior leaders, people like that. And so it could include some personal and professional development at this level, Jack, but really what is needed for that person to enhance their leadership performance. It could be work around leadership styles, leadership mission, leadership vision, anywhere from the tactical to the mindset stuff, even things around influence. You mentioned earlier in the bio, like, we focus on getting women of color, BIPOC women into positions of influence and power. It could be around thought leadership. It could be around professional branding. It just becomes much more tailored and customized at that level, but it's all around leadership.
Okay, thanks for clarifying, because for me,
Yeah.
I know for myself, I get confused between career coaching and executive coaching.
Yeah.
Because there just seems like, well, they're both career related. So it's great to
Yes.
have you make that delineation that, okay, this is more focused on leadership, thought leadership, more at the executive level. And of course,
Mhm.
having the client,
Mhm.
what do you call the relationship? A client?
Yeah. Client.
Okay.
Yes. Mhm.
Define their goals.
Yes.
So, okay.
Absolutely.
So within your organization, Embrace Change, do you
Mhm.
want to share with our listeners more about your work?
Oh, great question. Yeah. So, we do offer a lot and Embrace Change, which kind of there's a lot of my own narrative and story behind it, but it started as really just me delivering career coaching. And at the time I was focusing on working with women of color in their mid-career kind of phase, which in itself is kind of broad, but really people with at least 5 or 8 years of experience working, under their belts. And sometimes, with folks who have a lot of graduate degrees, which does tend to be a lot of people of color, women of color, some of that honestly goes towards your work experience. Because let's say you're doing a fellowship, you're doing, those kinds of things, you're functionally pretty much working, even though you're still in school. So a couple years of work under your belt, all the way to, people in their like early 40s or so, like that was kind of the range I started out with. But now we've got everything from individual coaching, which I have a team of incredible coaches of color, experts in different areas who support our clients individually in our comprehensive coaching program, all the way to, you mentioned our leadership accelerator. So we have a number of group, cohort, community based support, like more like peer support. We have an EC collective that we launched back in August, and that's for women of color who are career minded, all kinds of levels. Very, very low entry point, super budget friendly option, because it is a really tough time economically for a lot of our community, and it has been. So that's like, $25 a month, more if you, less if you sign up for the year type of thing, and you get tons of support. So a community of like 100 plus women of color. And then on the organizational side, we also work with everyone from government agencies to nonprofits to corporations to startup and tech on an institutional level, because I believe that the changes that we are trying to implement and Embrace Change, which is to say like a more equitable work environment, like our kind of little motto slogan is getting all women of color the money, power, and respect that they deserve in the workplace. And by extension, people of color. I don't think I'm going to see that really happen before I die. Like, not to be bleak about it, but I think that is a long range goal. We are trying to move the needle towards that, but we're not going to be able to achieve that with only individual solutions.
It sounds like, you're also working with organizations
Mhm.
to actually provide this support because mental health contracts, and I work with
Yeah.
clients who are working in these major tech companies, and
Yeah.
and a lot of them are women, and they talk about the
Yeah.
lack of resources available.
Oh, yeah.
So I think one thing I like to learn more about, with
Hmm.
the clients you're working with, it
Hmm.
sounds like you have a wide cast of industries that are
Yes.
being represented.
Yes.
Yeah,
I kind of made it a point, me personally, to be industry agnostic, even though a lot of people sort of disagree with that approach. But my whole thing is we are here to center women of color in this, and I believe we need women of color in all industries and at all levels where decisions are made. And so I never limited our work and Embrace Change with a specific industry. Certainly there are some that come up more than others, just because that's sort of how it happens. But it's part of my point of view that in order to really make broad scale change, we need people from all angles targeting, this particular problem and working towards it. So it's complex because we live in a complex world. That being said, I do think that resources tend to be lacking for people of color in general. I mean, just think about it. The level of generational disadvantage that we are facing structurally is massive. That's why we have these massive pay gaps, career earnings gaps, leadership gaps that are more acute for women of color. When you look at the data, it is really subsets of women of color that are really the most disadvantaged in that AAPI women have the biggest out of the different women of color groups, the biggest leadership gap. So they're most highly represented at the individual, frontline staff level, but then they're least represented at the executive C-suite level. Latina women face the biggest gap in terms of pay. So it, it's a it's a lot to choose, I guess, as our mission to chip away at that at Embrace Change, but that's our focus. And to me, again, that requires a lot of resources across industries and coming at the problem both from, a top-down institutional solution direction as well as individually. I believe we can do a lot.
yeah. And for people who are wondering about the specifics of maybe potential barriers and maybe some of your clients are facing, because we
Hmm.
talk about what are some of the issues, the sticky areas that people
Yeah,
are preventing people from making that change.
yeah.
Are you able to share with us some themes that you have noticed amongst women of color and providing
Mm.
some specific examples?
Yeah, definitely. So I'll share some kind of more like a larger framework and then get down to maybe two, we could think of them as sort of case studies that illustrate what
Sure.
I'm talking about. So, you know, we've all heard, probably, I shouldn't assume, but probably most people have heard of the glass ceiling, for women in general, that there's a level at which they can't get beyond in terms of like moving up org charts. But you could also think of this more broadly as like not being able to achieve whatever their career goals, leadership goals, financial earnings goals, whatever that might be. There's a gap that's gender based. For women of color in general, and specifically Black women, there's this term concrete ceiling. The earliest known reference I know to the term concrete ceiling was coined by Jasmine Babbers. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that correctly, but Babers, in an article called For Women of Color, the glass ceiling is actually made of concrete. So I find this metaphor very accurate and powerful because if you think about it, with a glass ceiling, you can see beyond it, and it also seems easier to shatter or break, right? I mean, I literally just broke glass in the kitchen last night. Concrete, not so much. I don't even know if I could lift a block of concrete. And more importantly, you can't see through that. So there is this really powerful element of opaqueness. I don't know what it I read this.
Opacity. Yeah.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, that we can't see beyond that, which is to say there is there is so much we don't even know that we don't know as people of color, but specifically as BIPOC women, because there's nobody telling us. And that is, I would say, largely by design. to keep the status quo, keep power amassed where it is in the hands of a few, etc. So I talk about the concrete ceiling a lot in our work and our different workshops and trainings and, blog articles and things like that, because I think it's important to make this distinction that it is intersectional. We are not simply facing the same kind of systemic barriers that white women face, for example. It is far more nuanced than that. And it is a lot more, I'll just say, daunting. Now, to add another layer to this, there is a term that maybe the listeners have heard of too, of the bamboo ceiling. So that's the one specifically for, Asian American, Native Hawaiian, Pacific Islander. And within that, there's a lot of nuance too, right? I don't want to gloss over that. Southeast Asian, Pacific Islander, it's completely, we have different stats if you can get disaggregated data. But the bamboo ceiling, just specifically talking about the nuanced intersectional way in which Asian Americans face different of these gaps, whether it's pay gap or the leadership gap. So I'm just going to leave that framework there as kind of an overarching backdrop, if you will, to mix a couple metaphors and just share with you some ways that past and current clients of mine I've seen, specifically these are AAPI women, have experienced this in a real way. So there's one client that I've had, let's call her Abby. So Abby has been a top performing lawyer, works in a very cutthroat subsector of the law in corporate, a law firm, and was recruited heavily for this particular role that she had. And when she came to Embrace Change and to me specifically, she was like, I want support because they have recruited me heavily. They've told me I'm on a 2-year plan to make partner at this firm. So,
Wow, that sounds
um,
very accelerated. 2-year plan
yeah,
for
I mean,
most law firms.
she wasn't starting out like just fresh out of law school. She
Oh,
had had a
okay.
number of years of experience somewhere
Got
else.
it. Okay.
Yeah, at other firms and things. So she was solidly mid-career, but she got recruited in with this carrot dangling in front of her. And I'd be lying if I said that the thought didn't cross my mind that that was a false carrot. But we started working together, got her on this kind of plan to get her meeting all their expectations or whatnot so that she
Well,
would be
hold
promoted.
on.
Yeah.
I can't help and just but
Yes,
interject
please.
here
Please.
because I'm thinking, wait, there is a recognition that this could potentially be this false carrot. Did you
Yeah.
address it? How was that even brought up, if at
Well,
all?
yeah, I mean, this was a number of years ago, so my memory on this is not the
Sure.
sharpest,
Yeah.
but it is my style to be I'm the type of executive coach that I'm pretty hands-on. Like I really put myself in there as a partner, a thought partner, like fully in there. I get very invested in the clients that I work with, which, now with the business being what it is and requiring what it needs from me as a CEO, like I only have a handful of clients that I work with at any given time. But anyway, I do tend to be pretty transparent and direct with my clients. And I tell them up front when they're considering working with me too, like, this is my style. It may or may not be for you, but you should know so you can make an informed decision, as informed as you can be. And so I know that we had talked about, like, basically, my own approach is like, I don't trust anybody as far as I can throw them, especially in an institutional environment, because I have seen this go sideways for our clients time and time again. They're promised this, and this is why I always emphasize to clients too, focus on actions over words. It's nice, the like sweet, like honey filled things that they tell
Oh,
you to get
yes.
you in the door,
Yes.
but
Yes.
then look at what they are actually doing. Where are they actually allocating budget and resources, time, money? Like, follow the money trail instead of listening to them being like, oh, you just need to do this much more, like moving the goalpost on you time and time again. Those are examples of things that I've seen so many clients go through, and I don't think we have seen the end. Like, I know we will see it again, and that's unfortunate, but that is the reality. So, this particular client, I'm sure we talked about it, just like, okay, this is what they have shared to you, and that's cool, but don't put all your eggs in one basket either. Make sure that, and this is a common thing, I'm not even saying for this client in particular, but I recommend it to all of our clients to not over invest in your current whatever employment situation you're in, because we are living in an age, and it's really blatant and clear now. Before you might have said, oh, Cynthia is just extra paranoid, which I am. But now we are living through this age of constant layoffs, constant job insecurity, constant rifts, reduction in force for people in tech. It's just part of the landscape, and we cannot operate off of this
We can't
assumption.
escape. Yeah, well, we're under
Yeah.
capitalism. This is
Yes.
reality.
Yes.
Yes. And so when people
Yes.
start thinking about, oh, I have a relationship with my employer, my boss, my manager. Okay, well,
Right.
is this a utilitarian relationship?
Hmm.
And I love what you're talking about here, paying attention to the actions. And
Yes.
I say this from an AAPI perspective, having
Yeah.
grown up in a family
Yeah.
where families are always talking about, pay attention to what they actually do. When they say
Yeah.
they,
Yeah.
in reference to white folks,
Yeah. Absolutely.
white counterparts,
Oh
pay
yeah.
attention to action. Then, like you said, the honey sweetness of
Mm-hmm.
engagement. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Right. So what basically happened with this particular client was, unfortunately, what we feared came true. She did everything that they asked. You know what I mean? All of the check-ins and the one-on-ones, on track, on track, on track. And then she is told, when it's coming up on that timeline, oh, no one's getting promoted this year. It's a bad business cycle. No one's getting promoted. Okay, if that were true, legitimate business reason, I'm not happy with that, but like I understand where it's coming from. But then guess what? Somebody does get promoted, and it's not her. It's a white guy who is more junior than her,
Oh my gosh.
and they passed over her and another white woman. So this is how the concrete ceiling looks in real life, I would say. She's not privy to the real conversations of what's happening. Like, certainly in the executive coaching, we talked about some of that stuff, but like, I'm not privy to what's happening behind these closed doors, right? We just talked about the probabilities, in planning it out and being strategic. But that's what can happen. And it was devastating. Like, it really, and this is where it can also overlap with the mental health support and the therapy, because she, throughout our time working together, and I mean, I love her for many reasons. This was also part of it because I'm a big fan of therapy, have had a lot of it in the past myself. She was always in therapy. And so, her therapist, also an AAPI woman, had been supporting her for long term. And, Abby, quote unquote, came in with like a level of self-awareness around herself that made the coaching that much more impactful for her. It was like planting seeds in a very fertile soil that had already been, tilled and cared for and everything,
Yeah.
versus trying to pour water on concrete. So, that's one case study. I don't know if you have
Yeah.
thoughts on that.
Yeah. Wow. I mean, I have to say, just from my own career, I've experienced. I was trying to find some terminology. I don't know
Mm-hmm.
who coined the bamboo ceiling, but I remember I
Yeah.
was searching. I was like, what's happening here?
Yeah.
Oh gosh, the bamboo ceiling seems to represent a lot of it. Now that's just metaphorically, of course,
Yeah.
within the bamboo ceiling, or
Yeah.
say even the concrete ceiling.
Yeah.
There's that's just a metaphor. The actual issues might
Mm-hmm.
be the stereotypes of, say, women of color. For
Mm-hmm.
instance, in this particular case of Abby, I'm
Mm-hmm.
having thoughts. Okay, what are the common stereotypes of AAPI women? And
Mm-hmm.
then you're getting into law, right? A very
Mm-hmm.
unique area of law. Oh
Mm-hmm.
gosh, they're probably demure. They're
Mm-hmm.
probably a worker
Right.
bee, right? They're
Right.
not leadership. All these
Right.
stereotypes, right?
Right. Yep. That's what happens so often to women of color in general, but specifically AAPI women. Now, I know and I feel like you'll appreciate this, so I'm going to drop another study for you all and any of the people listening who want to look into it. So, Ashley Shelby Rosette is the professor's name, business professor at least last I checked, at the Duke Business School. I don't really know how to pronounce it. I think it's Fuqua, Fuqua. Anyway, if you try to Google, and if it's hard to find, people can just reach out to me on LinkedIn and I'll DM you the PDF. But she did, to my knowledge, the only intersectional study on what happens at the negotiation table for different sets of women. So it's like the only intersectional study of negotiation for women of color. And, she was limited to in terms of what could be done. But basically, they looked at what happened to women in general, white women, Black women, and then AAPI women. So in that excluded are Latinas, Latina women, Native women, Indigenous women, like that was excluded from the study. So there are limitations, but one of the findings was that for AAPI women, what works well at the negotiation table is you talk about, because the stereotype bias against us is that we are competent. So we are that workhorse. We are the person that knows the stuff. We're the nerd, but like we're not the leader. We're not going to be assertive. We're not going to be transformational. We're not going to blah, blah, blah. But we're really good, when it comes down to the data and skills and just getting stuff done. I would say some of that bleeds over into women of color in general, just the workforce kind of
Lack of
stereotype.
visionary, lack of
Right.
creativity. Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Just buy the
It's
book,
horrible.
stay quiet. There was another podcast I was on years and years ago. I think it was called Rock the Boat because, we're not supposed to rock the boat. Yeah. So Abby, as we're calling her, was doing really good work for the firm where she was. And so if you think about it that way, what is the incentive for them to promote her? Why not just keep dangling this false carrot? And what if she leaves, we'll just find another one. Like I don't know, like I don't know how people are thinking about this, but that could be a part of it. But ultimately, I don't want this to simply land as a downer for people, even though it objectively is. What I think is the lesson that we have to take away from this is that don't put all your eggs in one basket thing. I've been talking a lot in the past year about career insurance, thinking about, okay, for our health, we have health insurance because we live under racial capitalism and we don't have, universal health care. So we have health insurance. For the car, we have car insurance if there's, some kind of accident or damage. For our home or a rent, we have homeowners or renters insurance. What do we have for our career, which is arguably one of the most, if not the biggest asset in our lives under racial capitalism? What do we have for that when there's that unexpected layoff, that unexpected, oh, the person who recruited you in just got laid off themselves and now you're here and you're like, this isn't what I signed up for. What happens if and when there's some sort of other occurrence? That means you have to take time off from your work or career, like what do we have for that? And the answer is like, there's no policy you can go out and just pay and buy. That's the bad news. But the good news is you are continually building this by investing in your career, meaning you are cultivating your network. You build those relationships and you build them broadly. Like, don't put all your eggs in one basket. You build them outside of your industry. You build them in different virtual and in-person spaces and communities. You make sure that people know about what you bring to the table, what you achieved, the impact you made, the difference you made on any particular project or role. And we learn, and this is very hard, I've found for a lot of my API clients, we learn to speak for our work. Like, don't buy into that your work speaks for itself stuff, because that's not actually how it works. So, building that name for yourself, that reputation, that thought leadership, the professional branding. So all of those things, keeping your skills sharp, but the right skills, like not just, I've heard it referred to as procrastinating by one of our clients. Yeah.
Okay.
People who they keep stacking the degrees because they love learning. And I respect that.
Yeah.
Also, is that a strategic use of your time, energy, and money to do
Mhm.
that? Are those the skills that are actually going to take you into the future and help you future-proof your career? Or might those be skills around? I know we might have a lot of feelings around it, but learning how you leverage AI, like learning how you make sure that, AI is coming for all of our jobs.
Yeah.
So how do you make sure that you make your way through that? So, career insurance, quote unquote, is all of those things, but that would be what I would steer people towards focusing towards. What's one thing you can do this week that will help you, plant more seeds, build that career insurance for yourself, and make sure that future you is going to be good.
Yeah. Wow, Cynthia, thank you so much for that comprehensive overview of some of the things
Or
you
it's,
do with your
yeah.
clients and giving our listeners a feel of, oh, what is it like to do executive coaching? What are some issues that gets brought up if
Mm-hmm.
I am a woman of color,
Mm-hmm.
particularly in this case, an AAPI woman
Mm-hmm.
and trying to advance in the leadership track?
Mm-hmm.
So now that we've covered some of what your organization is doing, as well as
Yeah.
some of your, coaching style, and thinking about, your work, I love you brought Abby as an example, an attorney, and then you've also in the past, done some legal work. So
Yeah.
just in general, like
Yeah.
share with me any memorable events or circumstances that influenced how you got into this work with Embrace Change.
Yes. So it honestly, the journey, like looking forward at it, Jack, was so random, very trial and error, very organic, very nonlinear. But what I will say for those trying to connect the dots, because I have been able to look back and connect the dots, is, my work as a public defender, I was really trying to move the needle on racial justice within the area of, being a public defender, keeping more Black and brown people of color, poor people out of the prison system. My work now is kind of like the flip side of that coin, if you look at it in a way, which is that I focus on empowering and making sure that women of color and people of color have the tools, the resources, unlock the wherewithal within themselves in order to move forward and gain, the money, power, and respect that they deserve. And that way, I mean, I firmly believe that if we have more people who are from communities of color on a more stable and even thriving financial footing, that's going to do something towards the number of people that we have who are incarcerated. Like, that's sort of how I think of things at a, high level. But what drove me in like a more day-to-day way is that I burned out of being a public defender. So I feel like probably a lot of listeners have either experienced burnout themselves or they have worked with clients and patients who have been through that or going through that. And so because I couldn't basically cope with like the stress of seeing my clients in that revolving door, in and out of jail, in and out of jail, in and out of court, and I couldn't see or feel the impact of my presence there anymore. I was like, I'm just a cog in a wheel. I was fully a cog in a wheel. It was very demoralizing, and the stress of it just got to be too much. So I get it into my head. This is very hubristic. I get into my head, I would be good at working for myself, so I should just start my own business. And so I did. And initially, I wanted to work with nonprofits and progressive, grassroots orgs to help them be more supportive to their staff, like basically help them create an environment where I wouldn't have burned out. Of course, that's a little pie in the sky. That didn't work out. So I trial and errored my way forward there because after 4 months of, not getting a single paying client, you tend to start thinking, all right, what else? What else can I do? So then the 2.0 of my business, and I write about all of this in detail and don't stay in your lane if people are like really want to get into the nitty gritty. My therapist, who is also an executive coach, she was like, why don't you do some training for lawyers? And I was like, no, I hate lawyers. I'm trying to get away from that world.
You
But
don't want to
again,
get re-traumatized.
you know,
Yeah.
but again, 4 months of not having a paid client will, cause you to rethink some things. And so, all right, I was like, I'll do one of these trainings for lawyers. What kind of even stomach doing this on? Because I don't want to do it about cross-examination. I don't want to do it about any of these hard skills. So I talked about mindfulness and wellness because I had gone on my own mindfulness journey with, under the kind of guise of my tutelage of my therapist. And it really helped me. So I was like, let me teach this from my lay perspective. And the training took off, Jack. Like I didn't get paid a cent for it, but there was like 2,000 views of it pretty much overnight. So I was like, okay, there's a demand here. Even if I didn't get paid, let me try to figure out how to make this work so that I can get paid and build a business. So that was a 2.0 of my business, doing these mindfulness trainings. That still wasn't working out after a couple of months in that while I was getting clients, it wasn't clicking for me. Like that wasn't the thing that was fulfilling some sort of larger purposeful meaning
Mission.
for me.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so I threw more spaghetti at the wall. And one of them happened to be coaching because I am an introvert and I love working with people one-on-one. I just didn't want 130 clients at a time. And I didn't want to be working with people who are like at one of the lowest points of their life. So I was like, let me try this coaching thing. People always come to me for problem solving. Who knows? I'm willing to try many things at this point. And it took off. Like I just posted on my personal Facebook page at the time, hey, thinking of taking on a few clients in a one-on-one coaching context. First session is free. Sign up here. And I got 4 signups, 2 of whom became paid clients, one of whom is still a client to this day, like almost 10 years later, in
Wow.
different capacities, because we have a lot of offerings. And then I just kept doing that. And it snowballed and it snowballed. And eventually I was able to build this marketing flywheel to sustain this business. So that's the real of how I got into this.
Wow. Wow. A lot of trial and error. And
Yeah.
also recognizing what you liked, what you didn't like, and more importantly, what was your mission? It's like you're navigating through this. You have a sense you want to help,
Yeah.
sort of holistically. You want to help others. You want to get folks out of this. I don't know. I wouldn't even call it judicial system anymore because
Yeah, I know. It's
oh,
not.
okay. Yeah, it's not that there's the system, and so you know that, and
Yeah.
I think about this too from a bigger framework, which is within capitalism. Is like
Yes.
where does capital move? So how do you
Yes.
inject capital at those who are in, say, in poverty or who are in proximity to that? So
Mhm. Mhm.
okay,
Mhm.
we help people of color, women of color who
Yeah.
may be in more disadvantaged situations. So yeah, that makes sense. Keep them,
Mhm.
keep their family, their kiddos out
Mhm.
of the so-called judicial system. So that totally makes sense.
Right
And
on.
so in thinking about your career as a person of color, what were some challenges you faced and overcame that you will be willing to share?
Oh, sure. I'll give you one from my public defender career, and then I'll say one from my kind of business entrepreneurial career. So when I was a public defender, I think that one of the stereotype biases that I found myself kind of having to overcome, but I'm honestly not even that mad at it because I learned to leverage it to my advantage, if you will, is, people would see me and they'd be like, oh, that's going to be some meek person. Like, how is she going to advocate for? They would basically underestimate my abilities in that regard, which as a public defender, my job is to defend my client against whatever criminal charges they're facing. So there was that. I'll kind of, I feel like one sort of tangent to that is that I practiced in the Bronx. So that is one of the, if not the poorest county in the US. At some point, it was the poorest county in the US. So my clients were almost exclusively Black and Latino men. So keep that in mind. There's not a lot of Asian people around in any capacity. So a lot of times when I would approach the rail, which is like where you walk up to before you're like in the part where you have to have permission to like go past there from the judge and the court staff, I'd approach the rail to talk to a court officer or something. And if they didn't know me, a lot of times their first assumption was that I was a court interpreter. So that I
Oh,
was there to be a language interpreter, not a lawyer. Sometimes also I would sit in the front row and they would be like, they would like question whether I was allowed to sit in the front row because that's only supposed to be for like lawyers and specialists or whatever. So I would say that was the worst of it, to be honest, in terms of the bias there. And why I say that I learned to leverage it to my advantage was that if and when that happens, you can find ways to basically correct people in a way that gets you actually some social capital. So if they feel bad because they just said something to you and you kind of like point it out in a way that's savvy, but like shows them that they just stepped in it,
yep,
basically.
microaggressions. Yes.
Like you kind of you have a little bit there, so like you can tell sometimes that they feel bad, like okay, that you I could parlay that into, all right, move my client a few a few people up in the list if we had to,
Mhm.
you know
Yeah.
little things like that. You kind of just learn to navigate this very political, and I mean that not in a like politics two-party system political, but just political broader way. In my business, I would say that one situation, and honestly, I don't know if I've overcome it. I'd say I'm still grappling with it. It's just the fact of being a business owner of color, a business owner that doesn't have generations of business acumen, of the knowledge of how do you actually get funding. Like I run a bootstrapped business. I started it with $10,000 of my own money that I saved up from being a public defender. Like I didn't know there was a way that you could fund your business any other kind of way, and I had to invest in, business coaching and other things to teach me those things. That's what I would say are the it's not exactly stereotypes, but those are the disadvantages that we are facing. And for those who are, you know, private practitioners or who have their own practice in some sort of fashion, you know what I'm talking about.
Yes, because it's
The,
like, this speaks to the concrete ceiling and the bamboo
yeah,
ceiling. We can't
yeah,
see. There's lack of opacity because
yes,
there's no models, right? And it's
yeah,
not just models. Growing up as a kiddo, I'm just thinking, what conversations were we having,
yeah,
in dinner table?
yeah,
When you think about wealthy families, they're talking
yeah.
about conversations, these social conversations that we are not
Not,
familiar with.
nope.
It's a sort of like social, sort of like a SES kind of a cultural thing that we are missing.
Mm-hmm.
And so when you have
Mm-hmm.
families of say entrepreneurs, families of executives, you kind
Mm-hmm.
of know what needs to be done. But for us,
Right.
like a lot of us who are in private practice or doing our own thing, like here at the
Yeah. Yeah.
Multicultural Counseling Institute, same thing, oh, Asian American doing podcasting, continuing
Yeah.
education. How does this work? Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. I know. And how do you actually get support? And I mean that in all of the ways. Like, how do you get real, robust support that, you know, the other, if you look at these top podcast lists or whatever, like they're backed by institutional money, institutional backing. They've got entire teams, like, and then we're just like supposed to compete with that somehow,
Yeah.
you know? Like, yeah. So those are things I think about. It's also why I'm very passionate about women of color, specifically in entrepreneurship, because I think it has a lot of potential, and people of color too. It has potential to free us somewhat from the racial capitalism to which we are subjected. I think it's one of the few ways that we could get anywhere close to like financial liberation in this world and lifetime. At the same time, it's hard and there's no roadmap for
Yeah.
us.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because we're not the ones who created the system. We
Right.
don't know that. Yeah, we don't.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. So for you, what does it mean to be a Chinese American executive coach?
Oh, it's very meaningful to me because I also got into coaching, as you heard, completely sort of by accident. And even at the time that I was getting into it, life coaching had sort of become a thing, but not really career coaching. Like this was way before that kind of bubble and that big wave happened. And so to be able to have been sort of at the forefront of this as a Chinese American woman with no real family tradition of entrepreneurship, like I'm very proud of that. What I will say, even though I was saying earlier, like coaching is distinct from teaching, but like in our broader work at Embrace Change, a lot of our work is about democratizing knowledge, like disseminating information to try to chip away even just a tiny, tiny bit at the concrete ceiling to tell people, like, this is what you need to be looking at, like face over here, not over there. Like, that goes beyond the coaching, but I do think of it as education and teaching. And I do come from a family line that has a lot of teaching and educators in it, including my grandmother, who was born in 1911 and lived to 103. Yeah, and was teaching English in Hong Kong and China before, even like women could teach probably in the US type of thing. So I'm very proud of that. And it feels good and important to be who I am doing what I'm doing.
Yeah. There is a form of teaching involved with coaching. Huge
Yeah.
component. Yeah.
Hmm.
So Cynthia, how can we support you?
Oh, you're so kind. Like if those of you in your lives, practices yourself feel like you could use some extra like strategic support or partnership in a coaching context, or if you're not even sure if it's coaching or if it should be something else, like reach out. You can find all of our stuff on the website at embracechange.nyc. But if you want to talk to me directly, I'd recommend DMing me, direct messaging me on LinkedIn. If you just go on LinkedIn and you search Cynthia Pong, you'll find me. You could probably just Google my name and the LinkedIn will probably be pretty high up there. So just send me a message on LinkedIn and, reach out and we can try to support you or your clients or patients however possible. I believe not in a lot of things, but I believe greatly in our power as a collective. I think we are stronger together. I think the only way through this horrific period of time we're in is to band together more. I built Embrace Change for women of color and people of color because I believe in solidarity politics, not identity politics. So, reach out, get involved, get engaged in our community. We have tons of incredible people. People always say how great the people are that I introduce them to and things like that.
Yes, and I encourage
Um,
people to look at your staff listing because you
yeah,
actually posted in really diverse group of folks,
yeah.
both in terms of background as well as the different areas.
Yes, I do try and appreciate you, Jack. And also for those who are like really just want the leadership guidance, I have a contributor column on Forbes for leadership strategy. I mean, that's a whole other story of like, how does someone like me with no business doing business even get themselves into Forbes? Another story for another time. But you can follow me on there if you Google Forbes Cynthia Pong, and then you'll be notified of all my kind of latest articles on there. So,
All right. Well, fantastic. Cynthia, thank you so much for, walking us through in this area of executive coaching, providing some really clear examples for, our listeners. And we're hoping to get this published for AAPI Heritage Month in May. So hopefully a lot of APIs are listening, because it really does strike a chord. When we think about executive coaching and AAPIs, it's almost as though it's incongruent to have those two words next to each other. So this is definitely an opportune conversation for the month of May.
Thank you so much, Jack. And I do hope it's helpful and supportive to folks.
All right. You take care.
Thank you. You too.
A huge thank you to our listeners. If you enjoyed this episode, please share and subscribe to People of Color in Psychology. You can also support us by registering for continuing education courses or making a one-time donation on the Multicultural Counseling Institute's website. Your feedback is important to us, so feel free to send an email, a message on LinkedIn, or leave a voice message on our website. Until next time, this is your host, Jack Sun.